Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Inspire channel. Today's guest is a woman who has lived a life packed with purpose, curiosity, and courage. Jill Orr is a retired hospital pharmacist, and she's also a pharologist, and I'm not sure if I said that right, who spent years serving patients with precision and heart. But she didn't stop there. Jill went on to become a lighthouse keeper, a historian, and an author, preserving stories, protecting coastlines, and shining light in more ways than one. She's a scientist, a storyteller, an adventurer, and a guardian of history. Jill's journey is proof that a meaningful life isn't built in one chapter, it's built by boldly stepping into many. Please welcome remarkable Jill Orr.
Wow, thank you for that introduction. No one has ever introduced me in that way before. Very touched by that. Thank you. And thank you for inviting me to have this conversation.
Oh, you're so welcome. So welcome. So we'll get started. I've prepared some questions for Jill, and I'm still new at podcasting, so bear with us. So Jill, what originally drew you into the world of pharmacy, and what did that chapter of life teach you about yourself?
Interesting question. Back in my junior year in high school, so this was a long time ago, when you're at that point where you're trying to decide what comes next for you, I kind of knew I would go to college and I figured I would study something in the medical field. I wasn't really drawn to nursing, but I was also an athlete at that time. So I kind of made this decision that I would go towards sports medicine. Later that same year, I had a reaction to a medication that I was put on, and it sent me to the emergency room. And so that caused a really big pivot in me to be curious about medicine, their actions, their adverse reactions. And so, also at the time, my mom was working as a personnel manager at our local Kmart store. And so I went in to have a conversation with the retail pharmacist there. And oh my gosh, he was such an advocate for pharmacy as a career for women. He talked about all the different practice settings that we could practice at, and he talked about the flexibility of hours. And if you're someone who is interested in getting married and having kids, this would be a great profession for you to go in. So that's what I did. I went to university pharmacy school, and I guess what it taught me about myself, this is kind of really interesting, that I chose a profession that I was really well suited for, both personality wise and giftedness wise. I sometimes joke, that I'm this triple Virgo, sun, moon, and rising signs are all in Virgo. And so that makes me this very detail oriented, analytical problem solver, meticulous organizer, practical, rational kind of person, great attributes to have as a pharmacist, I would say. So it taught me that I really chose pretty accurately for, like what I was good at. And it was interesting during the course of my pharmacy career, even, I found myself being given opportunities to do things that I never would have thought as a pharmacist I would get to do. I was handed projects to redesign pharmacy practice areas, both inpatient and outpatient. I found myself on the path to practicing in oncology. I never saw that path for myself to be in oncology. I started out more down the surgical route. But this experience in oncology actually prepared me later on to help my parents through both of their individual cancer journeys. So I think what I learned was like wherever I was, whenever I was there, it's where I was meant to be. And it was preparing me all along for this path that I'm on now.
Wonderful. And it's wonderful that you had the interaction with that pharmacist who right at that time was perfect timing. It's like perfect alignment.
Right. I mean, and to have someone so encouraging in that way. And I wondered, like, if he would have had a different attitude, would that have changed my decision making in any way? Like, would I have like second guessed that decision at that time. I don't know, but I was so thankful that he was such a strong advocate, you know, for women to go into this profession.
Yes, that's fabulous. Wow. Was there a moment when you realized pharmacy was no longer aligned with who you were becoming?
Yes. Um, I would say it was like back in 2018 or 2019. The nature of my job was like moving in a direction that I wasn't really interested in practicing anymore. Compound on top of that, I had worked for like at that time 29 years at this very same hospital. And I kind of had this feeling like I think I've contributed as much here as I am going to or that I want to. So then if that was true, now I had to figure out what do I do with that, right? I'm like, do I like get a job someplace else just to be in a different practice environment? I wasn't really sure. I did like cut my hours back at the hospital. I went from full time to part time. That gave me just a little bit of a cushion, a little bit of freedom to kind of like explore what else to do with my time, I guess I would say.
Hmm, that's interesting. Yes. There was this that you felt like, wow, this is all that I've contributed and now I'm ready to look at something different, new direction.
Yes, which was, really surprising for me because that's not typically my personality. I am pretty much a stay on the road that you're on and no deviations. And um, you, I think because, I was kind of raised in this environment of, I went to school for pharmacy. I'm going to be a pharmacist, right? That's kind of my path. And I'm going to do that until I'm in my 60s and then I'll retire. That's kind of the programming that I had within me. So the fact that I was even entertaining something else was kind of miraculous, I'd say.
Yes. Well, and what emotions did you feel? Did you feel any specific emotions when you decided that?
It's kind of a mix, kind of excitement, curiosity, a little bit of bewilderment, because like I just alluded to, like that was not my personality. I had gone through a divorce and I was very much stay on this narrow path, predictable path, stable path. You're taking care of yourself and your son now. None of this wonky stuff of doing something else. You want to know that you're gonna, have an income and you can take care of everything. And so the very fact that I was entertaining doing something else was kind of wild. But it was interesting because also at the same time I was kind of like shedding this persona of that. Like I was stirring that up a little bit. And that was part of the bewilderment of like, well, who is this person who's having these thoughts because they were never thoughts that I had entertained previously.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, and so am I saying this right? Pharology?
Neurology,
Yeah.
yes.
So that's fascinating, so interesting. What brought you to that? What was it about lighthouses that drew your interest?
Well, I would say so in 2005, I was divorced. In 2015, I became an empty nester. And with that event, I started looking at ways that I could occupy my time. And so one of the things I looked into was volunteering. And I came across this volunteer opportunity to be an assistant lighthouse keeper. Now, this was going to be on an island lighthouse in northern Lake Michigan, 7 miles west of the Mackinac Bridge. So it's on an island. It just looked like an adventure. And I'm like, I'm going to start saying yes to adventure, right? And it's really interesting because I was familiar with this area when I was married and even after my divorce, we would still vacation up in this area. So I had been coming up here since 1990. I knew the area. Interestingly, I never paid attention to any of the lighthouses. Going between Wisconsin and Michigan all those years, lighthouses just weren't really on my radar for whatever reason. I don't know why. Um, didn't have an interest in them. We never stopped to visit any. For some reason, I just followed this curiosity. And then when I had that first volunteer experience, it's like this veil was lifted from my life. I'm like, where'd all these lighthouses come from? And then I just was like wanting to explore and learn more about the lighthouses. And that's kind of where pharology comes from. It's like the study of lighthouses. So that was kind of like my foot in the door of lighthouses, was just saying yes to a volunteer opportunity that just ended up opening all kinds of new doors for me.
Wow, that's so interesting. And it's like one of my mentors, he said the more aware you are, the more that you see beauty all around you. And it's like the more aware that you became, it's like, wow, I never noticed this before. And it's beautiful.
That is exactly it. It's kind of funny. I laugh at it now because lighthouses are built to be seen, but I was traveling past all kinds of lighthouses that I never saw before. And now that's like where I'm gravitated towards.
So, what was it about lighthouses that spoke to you maybe deeper on a spiritual level?
Well, I would say like my interest is kind of gravitated towards offshore lighthouses in particular. And I think what I'm really attracted to about them is like the mystery behind these offshore lighthouses. Um, how did they get built so long ago in these remote locations in the water? Why are they there? Who worked there? What was their life like? So all of these kinds of questions. And then have you ever seen the movie Sabrina? It was in 1995. Harrison Ford, Julia Armand, Greg Kinnear were in that movie.
No, I haven't. Now I'm going to look it up.
Look at that movie. So I love this movie, and this was again way before I ever had any kind of like attachment to lighthouses. Um, but there's a scene in the movie that takes place on Martha's Vineyard, and Julia Armand's character Sabrina hands her camera over to Harrison Ford's character Linus, and she invites him not to take any pictures, just look through the lens and like tell me what you see. And so he starts looking through the lens, kind of rattling off what he's seeing. He's like, ocean, 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 quaint little fishing village, ocean, lighthouse. A guy going into a lighthouse. And then here he pauses and he says, there's a job for you. What must that be like? What kind of guy takes a job keeping a lighthouse? I've never forgotten that scene. And I think maybe on a spiritual level, that is kind of like the question I'm kind of asking of myself is, what kind of person takes a job keeping a lighthouse, or in my case, volunteering um, to keep a lighthouse? And what is that I'm looking for inside of me? You know, I enjoy the isolation, but when you're in isolation, you are confronted with yourself there, and that's a big thing. And you are also kind of pondering bigger questions about God there. At least for me, that's what the experience is like. And so you're given the opportunity at this isolated location to just breathe and observe and listen and question. And, that to me is kind of like, what I find about lighthouses.
And just be present.
Yes. And unplugged, honestly, because that's one of the things that I really encourage people who come out to our lighthouse to do is don't do any of the stuff that you can do when you're at home. Sure, take pictures, but unplug from everything else and just be and observe. And because you see sunrises and sunsets and stars and ships. And this year we got to see Northern Lights, and it was just phenomenal. Like the photos we have from that day back in September are just like out of this world.
Wow, that's interesting. So, do you remember what the first lighthouse that really drew your interest? What did it feel like in that moment? The very first one that you noticed?
The very first one that I noticed, well, probably would have been the one that I was going to volunteer at first, because I hadn't really had much exposure before then. And it's really interesting getting there because it's an island. So, we had to take one boat to be met by Zodiacs to like load into the Zodiac all of our supplies and go over to the lighthouse. I don't know that it was so much maybe the lighthouse itself, but the experience that I had there was like really moving because, and I hadn't really thought about this in a while, but one of the volunteer jobs I took when I was there at that lighthouse, not a sexy volunteer like job by any means. Um, in the basement of the main house there was a shelf, floor ceiling size shelf, and it had these containers of nails of different sizes and shapes and screws. And I was down there to organize them, right? Perfect activity for someone who's a pharmacist, right? We're used to, when you're working on the supply side and the distribution side in a pharmacy, pill bottles and vials and, things got to be organized and you want that organized. So, Jill, you're the right person for this job. And as I'm going through these containers and I am seeing nails of shapes and sizes I had never seen before. And what was unique about them was they were hand forged nails. So these weren't round nails, they were square nails. So they had four-sided nails and the square top. Some of these nails were just like huge. And in the aloneness of that basement, I swear to you, the thought that came over me was the crucifixion of Jesus.
Oh, yes, yes.
And the thought that came into my head was, I put those nails there, meaning him on the cross. My sin put those nails there. And it was like one of the most humbling experiences because I hadn't really like understood like the substitutionary death on the cross that like vividly. But understanding like the pain of it, I don't know. It was just one of those things like I didn't go there expecting to have that type of like experience, right? Well, I returned to St. Helena back in 2024, so 9 years later. And one of the first things I see in the boathouse there was someone had taken a collection of those nails and put them on a display board from biggest nail to smallest nail of the hand forged nails. And it just took my breath away of being like confronted with that again and reminded of that again. So it was just kind of this full circle moment of like my experience there is always highlighted by that.
Wow. That's quite a story. Yes, it made you feel not just his physical pain, but emotional pain that we could put another person through that.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
So
Exactly. Yeah.
humbling for sure.
Oh, yeah, it was.
So, what does lighthouse keeping actually involve, and what surprised you most about the experience?
Lighthouse keeping is actually not that dissimilar from the historic lighthouse keeping because you're there to keep things running. So have to keep the generators running, have to keep the propane flowing, cooking, cleaning, loading and unloading the boat when it arrives, monitoring the weather. We keep an actual 24-hour watch at the lighthouse. So somebody is up 24 hours, different people split up those 24-hour and 4-hour blocks. We keep a logbook. So a lot of that stuff really isn't any different. The only thing that really is different is the fact that the light goes on and off by itself. It's automated. So it goes on at sunset and goes off at sunrise. So we're not doing anything with the light, but everything else, we're doing out there. In addition to that, we are helping with the restoration work. But I would say probably what surprised me most about it was how quickly the weather can change out there. And it can go from calm as glass and quiet, no wind, to just like all kicked up fury. And then it can go in the opposite direction where it is blowing full force, 44-knot winds, and then just boom, calm. Like it's just amazing to me how that could happen. One other thing that was surprising was last year. We opened up in May for the first time, like the earliest that we've ever opened in May. Usually we're going out there in July, typically. And I knew we were going to hit the midge fly hatching. So midge flies are these little tiny, flies. Thank God they don't bite, but they're a nuisance. But we were out there during the time that they hatch. And when they hatch, they are in the millions. So imagine you're kind of a prisoner in that lighthouse, and you only go outside when you need to do anything, with the generators or to, do your walk around the crib and check and see, that everything's okay. But I had to wear a full head to toe bug suit to be out there. We had to get one of those like boot scrapers because when they die, they don't have a very long life cycle. So when they die, now millions of flies that were flying are now dying, and you've got dead midge-fly carcasses that you're walking on, which can be really slick. So, and we don't want
Oh,
to bring that stuff back into the lighthouse, and we
yeah.
have enough like trip and fall hazards out there. That doesn't need to be another one of them. So
Yeah.
that was like the other thing. Like I knew it was coming. I like really wasn't prepared for what that would look like. And actually some of the video footage that I shot and shared on social media kind of went viral. Other places like nationally picked it up, which was really kind of funny. I wasn't really like expecting that, but you would literally see midge flies on the external wall of the lighthouses in such numbers that they were flowing like lava down the side of the
Oh
lighthouse.
my goodness.
The more they piled on each other, the more they slid down the tower. It was something else to really like
I
experience.
bet. You'd never think that. I mean, me not knowing that, I never would even think about that.
Oh yeah, yeah. I was not prepared for that.
So you know what it kind of reminds me of is a lookout tower in the forest.
Mm-hmm.
Similar, I mean, analogy, it's like you're kind of looking for things and monitoring things.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, a
and
lot
the
of our days.
weather.
Oh yeah, for sure, weather, because if we've got storms approaching, we have to be kind of strategic. We have to go around and close up windows and doors and make sure that there's nothing sitting out on the crib that could be launched off in the wind. Anything that's out there that's meant to stay has got to be tied down. So we have to just pay attention to that. And we're also, interestingly, paying attention to make sure everybody's accounted for,
Yes.
so if we've got, it's like we need to make sure no one's gone overboard, that type of thing. Very practical stuff, I would say. But yeah, it's and even safety, had to think about, safety issues out at our lighthouse. If something happens, until somebody can respond to our location, we're on our own. And so I brought out a couple of AED devices that we have split up in the tower. So, any one person having to get to them can get to them quicker. First aid kits. We had to work with our local EMT to come up with like an incident action plan. Like, what do we do if something happens? Who do we call? What
Yeah.
does that whole process look like? So we've had to, think about that out at our location as well.
Huh. So my next question kind of falls in line with what we covered about solitude, the environment, and the history, how it shaped you personally. Unless you have something to expound on that, that's you kind of went over that one already.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the one thing I would share, I mean, I love the solitude, but I shared this with some third graders that I had been working with recently during their section of studying the history of Michigan and lighthouses. Was the lighthouse for me is like a classroom where I get to be both student and teacher. I am always studying and learning about, the environment out there, the wildlife that we see and how it impacts the lighthouse, the water and the waves and the weather and all of that. Like I have to study it and understand it to do my job better. But then I'm also get to be a teacher because, when our volunteers come out, I have to orient them to the lighthouse. And I also give tours to them and anybody that comes to visit our lighthouse or stay overnight at our lighthouse. I tour them through the lighthouse. And so it's learning the history and then sharing that and teaching that too. So I kind of get this kind of dual classroom experience out there.
Yes, that's yeah, for sure. That's a great, yeah, you can always be a teacher and you can always be a student.
Absolutely.
So, did lighthouse keeping change the way you see time, purpose, or your own inner light?
Well, I think the way I look at like what I do out there, there's kind of this duality out there. And maybe it's an attitude because like when I first read stories of original lighthouse keepers out there, a lot of it really did focus on, the effect of isolation on them, the fact that they're away from their family, away from family events. There's always this kind of uncertainty about when are you going to get off the lighthouse, and that's true today. Like, we pick days that we're going to come and go, but we have to come and go as Mother Nature allows us to. Will your supplies last? Will you get along with the people that you're with out there? And so all of that can be very, and the monotony of all of the housekeeping stuff that you're literally doing every day can be very much kind of drudgery. And I kind of frame the dichotomy of drudgery versus divinity. You have a choice of how you look at all of those activities, whether it's just a slog every day to do the same thing in the same place for an unknown specified time, um, or it's divinity, like you get to be in this beautiful location, seeing what you get to see. Um, you know, I love the fact that like in the morning and at night we get to sit down with our volunteers and share a meal together and tell stories. And so there's such richness in doing that, and getting to know other people in kind of that intimate setting. And so I would say that that's kind of where I've had to like reframe like this isn't really drudgery. There's divinity in this kind of work. And I think, even some of the historical Coast Guardsmen who would get assigned out there, so, they either really hated it, they thought it was like punishment to be assigned out there, or they loved the environment. Hey, I get a chance to go fishing, or, I just love being out on the water, or, yeah, I can see my purpose. Like I'm here to keep this light shining so those boats and boaters stay safe. So there's always an attitude that you can develop towards anything that you do. And so that was like an important contrast for me to understand.
Hmm. Yes. So, in reinventing yourself after a long career is a bold move. And what gave you the courage to step into something new, completely new, even though you kind of went over that, but that's okay.
I think it was having the evidence from my career as a pharmacist that I could take on things that were handed to me and figure them out. Like having to redesign an outpatient program, having to design a brand new stem cell transplant program for oncology. I had no experience in any of that stuff, but they entrusted me to do it and to figure it out, and also kind of gave me free reign to figure it out and fashion it how I felt, it was best going to work. I was given that same freedom out at the lighthouse. Like, here you go, Jill, figure it out, like however you see it going. And so, and I was given the freedom um, to recruit and screen and select and train all of my volunteers. So the responsibility was on me to, review all of the applications and try to come up with the best fit of teams with, different skills that people had. But I was given that free reign. So there's a lot of like freedom in that, to do it. And then the freedom to like tweak it the next year, depending upon, how things would go. So I would say just having that prior evidence, even though like initially that wasn't something that I noticed, but I made that connection later.
Yes. And it's like a different level of confidence and stepping outside of your comfort zone a little bit.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Like this was never anything that I had done before. Wasn't, I wasn't a boater. I wasn't anyone who was on the Great Lakes or anything like that. And maybe ignorance was bliss in a certain extent. Like really know what I was getting myself into. I just knew that like, oh, this sounds like a really juicy, fun adventure experience, And that's that part of me that was wakening up at that time to like want experiences like that, or and maybe it was wanting a new challenge in my life. I kind of felt like in pharmacy this was as far as I was going to go, but now I wanted to like test myself and see.
Yes, for sure. So, was there a struggle with identity between pharmacist and pharologist?
Well, I think I kind of struggled with that, like that voice of doubt, that kind of like, speaks in your ear, like, who do you think you are? Are you sure you want to do this? And that voice, I think, is there to try and keep you safe, and that's to be expected. But I like wasn't interested at that time in safe. I was starting to like spread my wings and try to experience risk taking, which was very, new for me. And so yeah, I question like, my qualifications for being out there. This lighthouse is 5,000 square feet of vertical space, so up and down stairs. I was living in a 1,200 square foot ranch house, so none of this, like in the big scheme of things, made any sense to me. You're going to be alone at the lighthouse sometimes. Are you prepared for that? So I would have all of these things kind of challenging me. You're moving away from your family. Who does that? So there was a little bit of guilt that's in there. So, it was just a lot of different voices, that like question my identity and question, like, what do you think you're doing? But threw it off.
That's a great level of awareness in you that you could, that you figure out those things about yourself. And those are important questions that people need to ask themselves and figure out about themselves in order to grow, right?
I think you can always talk yourself out of something. Are you going to talk yourself into something? This came up in a forum for me recently, and talking about like decision making and how important decision making is and making a decision. But this one person said, the most important decision isn't the first decision, it's the decision you make after that decision. Are you going to get behind your decision? Are you going to line up with your decision, or are you going to undermine it? Are you going to let doubt creep in? And are you going to give yourself excuses and outs and everything? So, yeah, that first decision is important. The second decision is get behind that decision and stick with it. So that was one thing that I learned recently, that I'm like, yeah, I'm going to tuck that one away and remember, because if you've got this split energy over believing and doubting, you're not going to make it happen. It's just not going to work, So you got to like make a decision and line up with it.
Exactly. So, what limiting beliefs did you have to release in order to fully embrace the new path?
I would say I had to release having perfect knowledge about how to do something. Like I'm always a planner to the nth degree, to the nth detail. And I had to realize that I was not going to have perfect information on any given day. You know, use your instinct, use your knowledge, respond to what's out there, but get used to not having perfect knowledge before you get started or to keep going. Um, and then I probably had to release like, you know, what use is your pharmacy knowledge going to be out here? In fact, it really helped me a lot. But I originally had those limiting beliefs of like, yeah, you're a pharmacist. What do you know about keeping a lighthouse? That kind of stuff.
Yes, for sure. What so what inspired you to dive into the historical side of lighthouses and maritime culture?
I think when I started literally walking and living and working in the footsteps of history in that location at the lighthouse, I felt this responsibility to know more about the structure, know more about the people, know more about the events. I felt that like really strongly. The people's stories of who worked there weren't really that well known because I think I mentioned this before. These offshore lighthouses aren't at the entrance of a harbor town, right? They're out, and people don't even always see them unless you are on the water. And so when automation arrived and the doors of the lighthouses were shuttered, those stories of the lighthouse and the people that lived and worked there were kind of closed up inside of them. And so once these lighthouses are starting to open up again, it was like a perfect opportunity to start exploring their history. And there's just so much rich history in there. And being the detail oriented person that I am, man, I find a little nugget of something and I will go down a rabbit hole to figure it out. And there's like so many interesting stories out there that I hope I have time to tell them all and to research them all because they're all like just really fascinating. And I would say too that these lighthouses are just like these monuments to maritime history, right? They represent the evolution of technology, even to the extent that evolving technology made the lighthouse keepers obsolete out there. But these lighthouses stand on the Great Lakes, represent expansion of trade and commerce, and they represent the settling of the Midwest. So there's just so much rich maritime history that they point to that I think people just, unless you talk about it, people don't think about it. And,
Right.
I would like to have those conversations.
Well, each one of them has their own story.
Oh, they do. Like, why are they there and what happened when they were there? I mean, that's some of the really fun stuff to dig up.
What is one historical discovery that completely surprised you and fascinated you?
Oh gosh, I've got about three of them, but I will share this one. About 2 years ago, I was watching a lighthouse documentary, and I noticed one of the lighthouses in there had like some features to it that I'm like, oh, this is kind of similar to our lighthouse. And I kind of screenshotted some images during watching that documentary on my phone and I just kind of tucked them away. A couple of months later, I'm going through some paperwork that I forgot that I had. And inside of this manila envelope are some photocopies of newspaper articles that a friend of mine, a mentor of mine in the lighthouse field, gave to me. And I'm kind of shuffling through them. And in that stack of newspaper articles is an article from February of 1908.
Oh.
And within the text of that just very short article was this particular lighthouse served as inspiration for the design of our lighthouse. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. What in the world? Really? And so that has like led me down this rabbit hole to like find more because this was a very short article. So it seemed like it was an excerpt from a bigger article. I needed to find the bigger article. I recently found the bigger article, like in the last month or so. So this has been
Wow.
a 2 year journey, and it is like one of the most famous lighthouses in Europe. And I can't wait to write this story. And I've been in contact with somebody on the other end at that lighthouse, and it's going to be kind of a really fun thing to share once I've got all my ducks in a row and stuff. But I mean, we've got a message in a bottle story from out at our lighthouse, and there was a death out at our lighthouse, and that has been the hardest one for me to like complete. Hate to say it, keep running into dead ends on investigating that story, but I'm not done investigating it yet. But there's a lot out there.
How did your research evolve into writing and eventually into co-authoring your book?
So when I first started like investigating lighthouse history, the only forum that I really had to share it on was our lighthouse Facebook page. And so I would do posts like on this day in lighthouse history or white shoal history, da 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 happened, right? But it's not really very conducive to long form stories. And so I kind of like, okay, what am I going to do about telling long form stories? Facebook really isn't the avenue for that. So I figured, well, maybe I'll start writing and submitting to Lighthouse Publications. But while on Facebook, I also came across this group called Light Beamers. And I'm thinking, oh, this must be another Lighthouse group. I'll join it. It wasn't a Lighthouse group at all. It was a group, a forum where you learn about writing your story and increasing your visibility. And I'm like, well, those are a couple of things that I could, skills that I could use at this point. Learn how to write story and increase visibility. Maybe that'll lead to like speaking opportunities or something like that. Who knows? But it was kind of going down that path because April, who runs that Facebook page of Light Beamers, was the one putting together a book project, and she invited me to be part of that book project. And she had kind of said that, well, if anybody should be included in a book called Shine Your Light, it's somebody who's got lighthouse experiences. So that's like totally like my in there. I didn't intend to, jump into a Light Beamers community. I'm there. Now there's like this book opportunity to be involved in. I'm like, serendipitous divine timing, I guess.
Yes, it just lined up perfectly for you.
It did. It really did. Yeah.
What inspired you to participate in writing a book about your journey, and what did you hope readers would take away from it?
Well, my first reaction to the invitation was actually reluctance because I'm like, who's going to want to read my story? I'm kind of a private person. I'm not about to like air that dirty laundry out for anybody in the public to consume. I don't, not really kind of my thing. But April, kind of convinced me that, well, maybe view your story as a bit of a lighthouse for somebody else. You know, um, Maybe somebody else will see themselves in your story and it will help them in some way. And I was also kind of reluctant because at that time I wasn't really a writer. I certainly had never written personal stuff. I'm like, I don't know how to go about doing that. Like, what voice do I use? What's that going to look like? What that's going to sound like? And I also had this, like, maybe a little bit of fear or dread of like repercussions from what I write. I just didn't know. But then I kind of thought, well, okay, here's an opportunity to step out of your comfort zone. Why don't you give it a shot? Um, and then I guess maybe my hope with what I wrote was that maybe in somebody's life it would be a catalyst for a really interesting conversation. And that was kind of like the expectation was like pretty minimal there. It's like, oh, start off a little bit. Let's see what kind of conversations this might stimulate. And that was kind of, why I decided to do it.
Great opportunity. Great opportunity. And that's what we're here for, I believe, is to help other people in some way. And sharing your story, even if it only helps one person, it's worth it.
Yeah, I mean, you know, maybe I could share that there's life after divorce. So there's life after being an empty nester, right? I mean, none of this was on any 5 or 10 year plan I had for my life. And that's what kind of is kind of fascinating about it was like, man, it just took like an ounce of courage to like envision something else and to say yes and take a chance. A lot of what I did, when I moved from Wisconsin to Michigan, I did that during a pandemic. Like there was nothing during that time period that said, Jill, you ought to be doing this. I even had people question me, like, are you sure you want to do this now? And I'm like, if I don't do this now, I think my soul will die. I've made the decision. I'm now getting behind my decision and looking back at it. That's exactly what I did. I made the decision and I got behind my decision and went for it.
Yeah.
And that was like, okay, now I have evidence of that.
What a great decision maker, Bob would say. Bob Proctor. He
We,
talks a lot about decision.
our other mutual mentor, Arash, challenged me one time during a call, like when do you remember doing something, like making a decision, making a strong decision, and so like on my refrigerator and on my laptop screen, I've got a post-it note still from that time he challenged me to do that. I put 2020, and that is my reminder that in 2020, despite everything else going on, I made a strong decision, and carried it through.
Yes. Yes, that's great. Great reminder for sure. So, what was the most emotional or meaningful part of the writing process for you?
Oh gosh. So one of the processes that they had us do was to create a story bank of ideas. You're asked to like choose something from your life to write a chapter about. So this is going to be like 4,000 words, right? And so, the story bank idea was helpful, but it was also like I was kind of afraid to resurrect a lot of these memories that would come up again. Wasn't comfortable with that. I didn't want to think about this stuff. I kind of let that back there and moved forward from it. And so writing, just a one-line sentence about a memory that came up was just kind of like punch in the gut kind of thing. Like, I don't see. Now this is where I was coming up against my reluctance to do it in the first place. Like, I don't want to look backwards. I want to look forward. And so, but here's one of the things that I learned about that was in order to find a common thread of events in my life, I had to look backwards and kind of connect the dots. Um, Soren Kierkegaard said something about life can only be understood backwards, but must be lived forwards, which interestingly is kind of similar to something Steve Jobs said about you can't connect the dots of your life looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. And I'm like, yep, I had to figure out being able to go backwards, digging up the stuff that I, didn't really want to dig up, but just to find where that common thread was that I could piece together a story and actually see what connected in all of those stories. So um, I think that's what I learned, and you know, um, it's okay to look back at your past, but be more loyal to your future than your past, I guess.
Yes, for sure. I'm thinking about doing my own autobiography. And at first I thought, no, I don't want to dig up the past because there's parts of it I don't like. But I know now you can choose to be you don't have to be emotionally involved in it again. It's your past and it's your story and you grew from it. So you don't have to be emotionally involved with it anymore.
I encourage you to do that.
Yeah,
I
thank
think
you.
you'll find it a very rich experience to do that. And like I said, it's really interesting how things make sense once you start looking backwards at them.
Hmm.
And maybe it's with a little bit of like tenderness that you're like, I had to go through that to get here. Even as hard as it was to go through it at the time, it's kind of like it got me here. So I can't be totally divorced from it. I can claim it, but I don't have to, ruminate in it. And
Right. How did writing your story help you understand your own transformation more deeply?
well, the premise of my chapter was eventually seeing the restoration of the lighthouse kind of in parallel with my own restoration. And so, it's kind of interesting. The tagline of our restoration of the lighthouse is same view, new vision. And so I kind of like, I understand that personally, where, the same view looking out my eyes, but I've got a new vision for me and I've got a new vision for my life. And so writing kind of helped me figure that out, that man, there are a lot of like parallels between my journey and needing to have a resurrection, a restoration of my life, kind of like the lighthouse did. So that was kind of like, oh, I really loved understanding transformation and seeing transformation in a kind of a symbolic way of a structure with like my own personal life.
Hmm. What life lessons have lighthouses taught you about resilience, guidance, or purpose?
I think I understand, like, I'm way more resilient than I ever gave myself credit for all the stuff that I went through. And certainly in my chapter, I didn't share all of the stuff that I went through. We kind of had to like narrow it down. But, um, you know, when you look at our lighthouse from far away, you don't see all the damage and the scars that are still there to get fixed. It looks like this really beautiful structure until you get up close and personal with it. You don't know that all that other stuff exists. And I think that's true, like, with yourself or just having relationships with people. Like, there's a lot that isn't exactly visible, from a distance, but you have to like dig in and kind of to get there. And, like our lighthouse that is still standing there shining her light despite all of the storms that she's weathered through the years. I kind of feel that way about myself, that I've like stood up through it. And I liked that idea of, you know, we all have scars, we all have history, but we're all like, the fact that we can stand up through that, guiding yourself, maybe guiding other people through your experience. I think that's, kind of important.
Yes, for sure. How has your relationship with light, both literal and symbolic, how has that changed through this work?
Well, I love, love, love the symbolism of light and lighthouses. It's knowledge, it's truth, it's hope, it's holiness, I would say. And, I probably didn't have that expansive of an identity with light or an appreciation for light in that way until, working on the lighthouse, working on my own writing projects, kind of bringing that awareness out of me. Um, so I think that's kind of changed, and I've also made this kind of strange connection between offshore lighthouse keepers and monks and monasteries. Like I see this really interesting like side by side comparison of just the isolation and the devotion and the going up to the light and the rhythm and routine of their days. And so it's all very like spiritual in a way, and it's a different way of thinking and even talking about lighthouses that I've made this up. So I kind of want to like flesh that out more and write about it. I even like generated a book cover with that theme in mind to write about, as just kind of like to remind me of that idea, because lighthouses are so symbolic. And that idea came to me out on the lighthouse listening to the lyric of a, do you know the song Horse with No Name?
Yes.
Okay, so there's a lyric in there that um, the ocean is a desert with its life underground and a perfect disguise above, right? So the very early Christian monastics were desert dwellers, right? And if
Mm-hmm.
you think about where our offshore lighthouse is, if you removed that water, we'd be sitting in a desert, right? And so that's like where this connection came. Ideas come to me all the time. I don't know where they come from, but I feel like if that idea's come to me, I got to do something with it. So
Yeah.
that's like an idea that's kind of swirling around that I want to do. But yeah, it's been kind of a that interest with light and the whole symbolism of like climbing the winding stairs up to the light that's symbolic of God. That's kind of like Moses, like climbing up Mount Sinai to have his like first interaction with God. It's all really kind of like fun to play around with that.
Yes, I like that. What parallels do you see between guiding ships safely and guiding people through life transitions?
I guess I would say that, we are all travelers on this journey called life. And it's a real comfort to have this like steady fixed point of reference. So lighthouses are that for people who are on their boats and traveling. And in life, like people can be like lighthouses in that same way to you, like having a mentor or having a wise grandmother or grandfather or just other people who speak like wisdom into your life. There's just, it's nice to have kind of that circle of people that are those steady points of references to you. I mean, I know you and I both share kind of this love of like mentorship and having that. And there's actually a book written by Steve Pemberton, and it's called The Lighthouse Effect. And in it, he is just sharing the stories of people, ordinary people, who were like lighthouses to him and to other people in their lives. And I just kind of love that kind of discussion about people as being lighthouses in that way.
Hmm. That's very interesting. What would you say to a person who's in a career and they feel stuck? What would you say to them if they feel like that career no longer fits them?
Think I would say follow that curiosity, follow that instinct, explore whatever else might be calling you. So if there's a chance to volunteer in something, take that chance and explore it. Don't let fear hold you back. Um, you might feel like you're like starting over, but you're not really starting from scratch. You're starting from experience, and you don't have to do it like all in one big leap. I mean, you can. Some people do that, like cut the cord and I'm starting over, but you don't have to. You know, Wayne Dyer said, "Don't die with your music still in you," and I think that is so beautiful. So if you feel something else calling you, like follow that star.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I believe it's intuition. It's God talking to you, like Bob used to say. We pray to talk to God, but our intuition is God talking to us.
Yeah, there you go. That's it. That's it.
Yes. What is the first step you believe someone would take when they feel called to reinvent themselves?
Well, I think this is something you and I both share. It's being under mentorship on some level. Like that can make such a huge difference in just perspective taking and exploring bigger ideas about yourself. I mean, at the time where all of this was kind of going on with me, I was kind of in that personal development exploration of Bob Proctor, Brendan Burchard, John Assaraf. Um, it was just like a lot of different people, Jack Canfield, another one of them, um, and it just like started me thinking about those things like self-image and attitude and decision making and doing things before you feel ready and setting standards, and all of that was kind of foundational to um, reinventing myself, because I had to reinvent like my self-image in order to like pull that off,
Mhm.
and no better way to do that than to get into the room with other people who are, able
Yes.
to help you along that way, I would say. So that, that was kind of integral for me. How about for you? I mean, mentorship is like everything.
Oh, it
It's,
is. It is definitely everything. It holds you accountable. Um, you there's just thoughts and ideas that you don't always entertain, but when you're around people that are thinking and acting and feeling differently, then you start, like Arash said, you start getting out of your comfort zone. You're around a higher standard of thinking and a higher standard of action. And that's definitely encouraging and makes a big difference. If you stay around that same surrounding and environment, you're not going to change.
oh, for sure. Like getting into a bigger room, a different room, all of that has like been really, really helpful for me, for someone again who, that wasn't my trajectory prior to that time. And it's kind of changed a whole lot of what I do, certainly what I know in my awareness.
Yes. And you know what? If we hadn't stepped into that one mentorship with Arash, we wouldn't be here talking right now.
There you go. Absolutely. Yeah.
What has been the most unexpected gift of choosing a completely different life path?
Becoming more of a risk taker, living bigger, dreaming bigger. I heard this the other day, and I'm glamming onto this. Don't let your age be your cage. Like a lot of people around me kind of throw that I'm too old or whatever, and it's the age thing. And I'm like, even my mom said this to me recently, and I just like canceled that thought out right away because I do not want to adopt that thinking that I can't do something because of how old I am now. And I think probably the other thing is just like being an example to like my kids and grandkids and having their support in this has been like a really good gift, that's important to me.
Oh, I love that, Jill, because I feel exactly the same way. And I've been in surroundings recently, um, at my job, and I'm not judging anybody, but yes, they are slightly older than me, but they talk about it all the time or ailments. And it's like, I don't
Yes.
want that environment or that energy because I don't think that way. So you want to be around people. Well, Bob used to say, I don't hang around with old people. He used to say,
Amen to that.
that's funny.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. What was it like co-writing a book about your journey?
Okay, so I co-authored a book with 12 other women authors that we were all brought together. None of us really knew each other or anything like that. So that was kind of fun. Um, we were each teamed up with one of the other authors to serve as like our accountability partner and someone who we could like get some feedback on for a certain portion of our writing. Like we weren't intended to show them all of our story, just to get some initial feedback on it. Because kind of like what the interesting thing was when this final book was published and came out, I didn't know anybody else's story that were in the book with me, except I knew a portion of the one of the other authors that I was mentor or we were accountability partners with each other. And so that was kind of fun. And so not knowing any of their other stories was kind of like this really interesting thing. Like you're all being part of a book, but we don't know each other's stories. But it's cool that and each of us kind of express this reluctance to like, I don't know if I want to share this or
Right.
you know you're not sharing like the pretty nice stuff about your
Yes.
life. You're sharing something that isn't, but you know that's the way that story was gonna work out. So um, it was just kind of funny in that way. But it was a cool experience to like make friends with 12 other women that you didn't know, but we all share this together.
Oh, I bet. Wonderful experience. How did your perspectives complement each other in the writing prospect, or excuse me, process?
Well, it was kind of interesting because, like I said, none of us knew each other's story. But when we started submitting our manuscript to our editors and our publisher, they ended up having to change like the secondary title of our book because what we all seemed to be sharing had a very similar vein to it, but it wasn't what they originally thought like our writing was going to show. So that was kind of funny. Our theme kind of changed to like stories of resilience and self-discovery and positive change. And most of them also like had this undertone of spirituality to them. And so, which even kind of changed like when our book was released on Amazon, what categories they were going to put us in because of that kind of like spiritual undertone to them. So that was just kind of funny that we're all writing these separate stories, but they all kind of have this similar theme to them
Hmm.
independently.
That's interesting how it was kind of going one way, but then it went another way, and you all did it collaboratively without even knowing it.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Divine intervention again, I think.
Yes. What did you learn about yourself through the collaboration?
I guess it was, like there's courage in numbers, and having other people kind of do this kind of helped build my own courage to tell a story that I was kind of uncomfortable with. The things that I feared about sharing certain parts of my story never materialized. I think that's one thing that I learned. I kind of created this story in my head that didn't happen. And the fear was just kind of like tries to keep us safe, and trying to like now value challenge and growth and courage over the fear part of it. I think just having another piece of evidence that I can do that
Hmm.
was important. Always looking for evidence.
Yes. Well, I think our logical brain is always looking for evidence, right? I mean, always looking for.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, give me proof.
Yes.
Yeah.
When you look at back at the woman you were before the transformation, what would you tell her now?
I would tell her that everything you went through was preparing you for where you are today. And everything that you go through can be redeemed and used, and continue to be more loyal to your future than your past, I guess is what I would say, like my pep talk to Jill back then.
What would you hope your legacy will be as a pharmacist, a pharologist, a lighthouse keeper, a historian, and an author?
I guess I would say that probably all of those on some level, because, some people will remember me as a pharmacist, and some people will remember me for being with me on the lighthouse as their head lighthouse keeper. And maybe one day they will read some history account that I've read. But, I kind of want to be remembered as a good and interesting mom and stepmom and grandmom, like, so, however people choose to like remember me, that's for them to decide. But when you interface with so many different people at different points of your life, that memory is what it is.
Hmm.
But it's kind of cool to think that, like by writing something, you can kind of live on in a sense through them,
Oh,
like
yes.
is like there's something that you put out there, you know, um, that hopefully somebody down the road in exploring history will find that interesting, that was dug up and written about.
Wonderful.
Um,
What is the next chapter you feel yourself being called into now?
Certainly more writing. I actually have a couple of like book ideas floating around in my head. I mentioned that other one about the lighthouses and monasteries, but I've got an idea about just writing the architectural history of our lighthouse, doing a cookbook of the meals and the stories that we've shared out at the lighthouse. I have an interest in doing a kids' lighthouse book. I think that would be a blast to do. I mean, it even has the potential to be a series. It could. So I think it's somewhere around that. And then, this last month, and it's kind of continuing on. I was invited to address like a group of third graders in a STEAM school, and there were 4 third grade classes going through their section on Michigan history and lighthouses. So they wanted to hear from a lighthouse keeper. So I got invited to Zoom in and talk with them, and um, kind of planted the seed, asked them if they like to write lighthouse poetry. And they're like, oh, hey, we just got done building our lighthouses. We're going into a unit next on poetry. So they're writing their poetry section on their lighthouses. And they're sending those to me. I'm going to get them published for them in one of our lighthouse magazines, and pictures of their lighthouses and stuff like that. So maybe it's working more with classrooms, and with kids and history and lighthouse history and that type of thing. Maybe speaking opportunities about lighthouse history, or maybe even women's groups about, life transformation and after you're in your 50s and later. So I don't know. We'll see what life brings. I don't know. I am just so ready for any door that opens to me. I'll step in and,
Well,
draw
I
that.
love the idea about children's books because I'm about to publish my third one.
Oh my
And
gosh.
yes, I love them, which I was inspired to write. It's not
Wow.
about me, but I was inspired to write because of Bob Proctor. I never
Wow.
thought I would write a children's book, but yeah, I have another one, but and then the third one. So I think
Wow.
your idea.
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. I love your idea about the children's book about lighthouses. And I've
Yeah.
also done coloring books, so I have two coloring.
Oh, wonderful. Well, so here's my idea for a children's book is came from a book that someone that I know in France that is involved in lighthouse restoration there sent me. And it's actually an adult lighthouse pop-up book. But I'm like, oh, wouldn't it be cool to do a kid's lighthouse pop-up book? And
Yes.
I can picture it all in my head, and I just have no clue, like, where do you start with a pop-up book, because that's not an everyday thing. It's just the logistics of it, the writing of it, and the illustration. That would be a whole nother, like, engineering thing to figure out. But I mean, this lighthouse book that was sent to me from France is beautiful. I mean, it is accurate and detailed, but it's an adult book.
Nice.
It's fabulous. But I'm like, okay, here's an opportunity.
Well, I paint, so I do watercolor, so I did all my own illustrations.
Really? Oh my gosh. Oh, what a great talent to have.
Yeah. So, and it's fun. It was fun to write it. It's so much fun.
When is it coming out?
Oh, my third one is going to come out probably in the next few months. I'm still at some final stages of redoing some things and so I'm in.
And is it related to the previous two books? Like, is it like a
Yes, a
chronology of
lot
some
of
sort?
them. Well, no, they're not, but the first one is about the law of vibration.
Okay.
And I was inspired by Bob. So these books are totally my imagination of Bob when he was a kid. Um,
Wow.
and Sandy Gallagher. I mean, it's all from
Okay.
my own imagination. And the first book is about him being a yo-yo player. He wants to be a yo-yo champion. The
Okay.
second one is him playing a musical instrument, struggling with the paradigm. And then the third one, he's swimming. As a kid, he's swimming and he's struggling with the decision of quitting or continuing in swimming.
Okay. Oh, wow.
So yeah, that's what that's about. And
Wow.
yeah.
I'll have to talk to you more about the writing children's book, because
Oh, sure,
I
sure.
don't have any clue, like, where to start. But like all of these things, I have so many ideas of projects to work on. And I like now, where I used to have this great discipline when I was a pharmacist, very regimented. Now that I'm retired, like, yeah, discipline, freedom for me has not been like the best thing, because now I'm like, oh, I want to do this and I want to do that and I want to write this, and like I gotta like focus and prioritize. It's like what I need to
Right.
do.
Narrow it down and stick to
Right.
one and then go to the next one, right?
Well, yeah. Well, so like Arash sometimes says, like, you got to act on an idea or it's going to be stillborn. I'm like, okay, what does acting on the idea mean? Is it simply, can I just write it down so I don't lose the idea? Like, I can't take every idea that comes to me and like go for it. It's like,
Right.
but I think I said this earlier. Like, I feel such a responsibility that any idea that comes to me, found me for a reason. And I feel like I need to take that somewhere, and
Hmm.
maybe it'll
I
happen.
understand.
But
But we have so many a day, right? We have to filter some of them out because we got to stick with one.
yeah, like I am really good at like starting and not finishing things because like, oh my God, squirrel, like there's another idea to follow. But yeah, I need to do better at
Well, I think Mary Morrissey put it really well. She said it's like the jumping monkey. You have so many thoughts in your mind, the jumping monkey, instead of focusing on one. And that, I mean, that's partly why Bob teaches the higher mental faculties. And one of them is the will and being able to focus on one idea.
now I have to
Oh,
explore that one again.
so, I mean, we are at the end. It was so wonderful, but I want you to tell us the name of your book. You might have a copy right there. You can show it to us and where it can be purchased.
Um, book is called Shine Your Light. It was an Amazon bestseller when it came out in several categories, so that's really cool. It's actually part of a trilogy of books that were done. So it was the third book of a trilogy, and the other ones were Step into Your Brave and Elevate Your Voice.
Wow.
And it's really interesting because like I feel like I could have written anything in any one of those titles because now I feel like, oh, I'm elevating my voice. Oh, I stepped into my brave. Oh, I'm shining my light. So it's like, oh, I think I could have like authored anything in any one of those books, but I'm glad the Shine Your Light one found me. So yeah, it's
Wonderful.
available on Amazon, and all of the proceeds from the sale of those books goes to an organization called Kiva. It's kiva.org, and it's an organization that gives microloans to women as entrepreneurs to help them along the way. So that was kind of a really cool like aspect of the writing of this was that we were going to be able to help pay it forward to other women to do something important in their life.
I love that, Jill. I did not know that. That is
Yeah,
fabulous.
yeah,
Congratulations. That is so wonderful.
yeah. I
Yes.
feel really good about that.
Yes, for sure. Great feeling. So wonderful. I so appreciate it. This has been a great podcast. I hope our listeners gain from this. Jill's a great inspiration and she has a wonderful, wonderful stories. Thank you so much, Jill.
Oh, thank you too. I really enjoyed, on this Sunday having a conversation about lighthouses and transformation. Those are such great topics.
It's wonderful. Well, listeners, if you want to purchase the book, go on Amazon. And if you want to reach out to us, you can reach out to us on our direct message on the podcast for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.